Hi, I'm Brandon Walton, and welcome to UTP Presents. Today on the show, we are going to be talking about the Tunnel of Oppression event that many universities across the country, including our own, have been putting on for several years now. I would like to welcome in our guests at this time, Jasmine Herrick and Andrew Geske. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. I'll start with you, Andrew. Please introduce yourself and kind of how you got involved with Tunnel of Oppression.
Well, like you said, my name is Andrew Geske. I work for Multicultural Student Services. As a support coordinator, I supervise our peer educators. I got involved with Tunnel of Oppression in the fall of 2012. I originally got sent over as a student liaison from our club at the time, Be Glad, now Pride Alliance, and I just kept going back every semester afterwards. So it kind of gets you and doesn't let you go.
How about you, Jasmine?
I'm Jasmine Herrick, the director of Tunnel of Oppression for Multicultural Student Services. I actually started out in 2013 as a student for the service learning program from Dora Ramirez-Dory's ethnic literature class. It started out just as a class assignment and just boomed from there.
What made you kind of want to get involved in a more bigger way?
Because what we went over in class and what we went over in Tunnel, what we did in Tunnel, really resonated with my real-world experience in a way that simply wasn't allowed before. I was allowed to talk about things that I'd never been allowed to talk about and receive a lot of social support for it.
How about you, Andrew?
Pretty similar, really. I think that the Tunnel provides, not only in its planning stages, but its execution, a safe space where students from all walks of life can explore the issues that impact them very deeply and are often considered taboo to discuss openly. So it's a very cathartic experience. Gets in touch with what really matters in your life.
So Andrew, for everyone that doesn't know, can you describe what exactly the Tunnel of Oppression is?
Tunnel of Oppression is an interactive theater experience. It's spread out throughout 5 or 6 rooms, and each room contains its own self-contained skit. Participants, the actors, might be involved in several skits, but the only consistent, movement is by the viewers, the audience, and then the guides who push them along and sometimes intentionally make them uncomfortable. It's about a 30-minute process, and there's debriefing afterwards because it can be an emotional experience and potentially traumatizing for somebody who has been through those issues themselves.
Jasmine, what kind of venues do you guys use for these Tunnel of Oppression events?
Mostly we use rooms in the sub. Our sort of dream is to eventually have the Jordan Ballroom. This year it's going to be in the Simplot, still a great place. It's very good layout, good for IT, and we kind of like it there.
Now, how did the Tunnel of Oppression get its start?
It started in the 90s at Western Illinois University and spread across the country since then, from New York to Los Angeles. Came to our school in 2005. It was brought to us by Ro Parker, who's our student coordinator for Multicultural Student Services.
Now, was this Tunnel of Oppression, was it created, why was it created?
It was created to give light to issues that people generally don't talk about and people generally don't understand. For example, a lot of times when we hear about political correctness on TV, we think of it as, oh, well, somebody's trying to tell us how should we be talking or thinking, when really it's usually an effort by a marginalized population to stand up and say, no, it's not okay to call me that word. It's not okay to ask me these really probing questions. It's a chance to give a voice to the group that isn't allowed to speak.
Andrew, why is it important for students to attend these events?
I think that all students across the United States should be given a glimpse of world events, local events, and activist sort of ideologies. The exposure is very important for developing a sense of where you fit on the, should we say, spectrum of critical thinking. Up until you graduate from high school, you're not really encouraged to think for yourself. You're encouraged to do the assignments that you have been given to the best of your ability, basically how to perform so that you get good grades. In higher education, the hope is that the skills we're learning allow us to examine whether it's literature, a scientific journal, or world events, examine it with a very critical eye and think what's legitimate, what's not, what's the context. Tunnel of oppression is just one way that we can explore issues that are distorted in popular media and take a really close look at what's really going on.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Jasmine?
I think what makes tunnel of oppression so important, especially in light of what Andrew said, is the fact that often we don't think about these issues because we're not used to critical thinking. And of course, people don't like to think of it that way, but we're really encouraged to take things at face value. And that's something we need to work on as a society.
Jasmine, what does this event do for students that they can't read about online or, read in a book for that matter?
It offers a very real-world connection to what's going on with other populations. In a textbook, you can get the bare facts, you can even get an emotional response, but it's very, very different than being in a room, in the dark, next to somebody who's telling you that this is really, really happening. And often the scenes are very provocative because the idea is to get people to emotionally connect to what's happening to others. And it's definitely something you can't find in the classroom or in a textbook.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Andrew?
Only that certain skits are just meant to be viewed, take it in visually and sonically, I guess. Others, the students who design them, want to be more hard-hitting, so it's very much a simulation of a real-life experience. So unless you have a very vivid imagination, you're not going to get the same experience by reading an article or a book.
Andrew, why do you think this event has caught on across the country?
What a question. I think that our generation, people who are coming of age after globalization, after the war on terror has begun, I think that we have a sense of injustice and tunnel of oppression and similar iterations across the country kind of give air to that spark that's lighting inside of people, allowing them to nurture it into, well, to keep the metaphor going, a raging fire of activist spirit. And I love that. I want to see it keep going.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Jasmine?
I definitely agree with Andrew. I think what makes this event so successful and so popular is the fact that it does spark an emotional response in people. It gets them up, it gets them moving, and it gives them a chance to connect with people that they otherwise would have avoided or just not noticed.
Jasmine, where does the tunnel of oppression come up with its ideas or themes?
Mostly from the student body. At this point in our training, we've actually gathered 10 topics from our student body at information booths in the center itself, and we're allowing the students to choose which topics they want to go with. It's entirely student run.
Does the university have any say on what you guys can or cannot do?
Tricky question. While there's no structure in place that completely disallows us from exercising certain scenes, every once in a while there will be pressure to not do a certain scene for any number of reasons. We generally examine the reasons and decide from there, but generally we found that sometimes when people don't want us to talk about something, that's the thing we need to talk about the most.
Andrew, do students typically respond well to these events?
I would say yes. The responses are overwhelmingly positive. We have I guess it's a means by which students can directly leave their comments for the actors in the debriefing sessions. We have huge sheets of paper and they can write out what they would like to say. But also they're communicating their responses to the counseling and social work students who work with us to debrief. And while some people have mixed feelings. Some people are, a little more on edge after their experience because of its resonance with their own life. Most people, even if they disagree with what has been said, they applaud the students for having the courage to say it.
Jasmine, anything you'd like to add to that?
I'd say that one thing, our feedback is mostly positive, but when there is negative feedback, sometimes it's due to our methods, sometimes it's due to what we talk about. But I think the thing that gets a lot of people is the fact that the tunnel of oppression makes the audience uncomfortable. It makes the actors uncomfortable, it makes the debriefers uncomfortable. And in a way, that's kind of the point. The point is to talk about what makes us uncomfortable so that we can heal from those experiences.
Do you guys take the feedback you receive and apply it to future installments of the Tunnel of Oppression?
Yes. We consider whether or not something works, whether it emotionally connects, and kind of draw from there. We also consider whether or not the scene actually incorporates what the participants want to say. Sometimes within the group, one message comes out when someone else actually wants another. And generally, when there is a conflict such as that, we work it out within the groups, and the message does come out.
Andrew, are there good turnout for these events?
It's been growing every year since it was brought to Boise State campus, so I would say the turnout is very healthy.
Jasmine, what is as someone that's personally experienced a tunnel of oppression, and it's really a lot to take in, I mean, do these events have to be so extreme?
I'd say in a way, yes. Often when people come out of tunnel, the question does come up of sort of why it happened, why it was made to be so extreme. The point of going through tunnel is to, at least through viewing, experience oppression as it folds out. Oftentimes there are confused feelings going through of why is it happening, why isn't it stopping? And unfortunately, oppression doesn't take a holiday. And you don't have the option when you're going through it to say stop, because your word is disregarded, sometimes even punished.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Andrew?
Not particularly, maybe elaborate. You're absolutely right, Jasmine, that there is no break for a given oppression. Suppose that you're subjected to racism. It doesn't stop just because you're tired or fed up or frustrated or sad. It's going to keep beating at you like erosion. Tunnel of oppression is designed to make people uncomfortable based on the things they have and haven't experienced. But it is only about half an hour. And if it sticks with you after that, it's probably a good sign that you're doing some soul searching, some thinking afterwards. But you can take comfort in knowing that your exposure is only as long as your viewing of those performances.
What type of events or themes have you guys done in the past?
Let's see, we've done all kinds of things. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We've done the school-to-prison pipeline in the United States. We've done a lot of subtopics relating to LGBTQ rights, sexual violence, policing of women's bodies, behavior. Jasmine, care to add a few?
Let's see, cultural appropriation, indigenous sovereignty and the Idle No More movement, masculinity and gender roles, and let's see, homeless LGBT youth. It goes on.
Those events sound pretty, extreme and, impactful. I mean, do these events run the risk of maybe traumatizing students, Jasmine?
I think it definitely shakes them up. And in our debriefing sections, we do have special sections marked off so that people can talk one-on-one with a counselor if need be. Generally, I think that the event doesn't traumatize, but it does bring out a sense of deep thought that people often don't access. Like I said, face value. And people are encouraged to really think about things in terms of not turning off the TV or not closing the textbook. It really goes on, and that prompts them to action.
Anything you'd like to add, Andrew?
We do have a waiver that we ask people to sign before they go through, but some parents feel comfortable to bring their small children. Personally, I would recommend that if you are feeling like you're in a very vulnerable place, maybe something has already gone wrong with your day, you're not in a good headspace to be exposed to systematic oppression, social challenges, then maybe wait a couple hours or come back another day. Tunnel will still be there sooner or later.
Now, Andrew, you mentioned, it is a lot to take in. So talk about the importance of having counselors there, because you guys do have counselors after the event is over.
Absolutely. The counselors are essential to the work that we do and to the success of Tunnel, because they're there to help people unload their negative emotions, work through, I guess, if you can imagine that something catches on you, like something really touched you while you were seeing it, and then you got shuffled off to the next scene. It lets you revisit that and express yourself amongst your peers, and also with somebody who is professionally trained, though perhaps not certified, in providing sort of a safe, emotionally neutral space to express yourself. So.
Jasmine, what is the balance that you have to kind of do with these things? So, I mean, you're still telling students, you have experienced this, but then not too much where it could really maybe stay or traumatize them.
I'd say the balance is a bit difficult to strike because we need to do what we came in to do. But at the same time, we don't want to go overboard by, say, physical contact between the audience and the guides. We discourage that. We also want to make sure that if someone is having a very hard time, they're able to leave if need be, that they have complete access to the debriefers. It's a challenge, but it's all part of what we do.
Jasmine, does this event prepare students for the real world and maybe even the job market?
I'd say in terms of the real world, definitely. Personally, I define the real world not just as the world of responsibilities or buying a car. I see it as the world in which you're not a child anymore, you don't live in a bubble anymore, and if you happen to have privileges that others don't, you engage with that rather than withdrawing.
Andrew, anything you want to add to that?
Other than that, I absolutely agree. I think that in terms of living in the real world, having any kind of skills in diversity and multiculturalism is a major plus, because it just means that you are more sensitive to the way the world actually works. Being ignorant is a quality of yourself and not of the world around you. Once you're exposed to a certain set of events or explanations or understandings, those don't go away. So we hope to plant a seed in people, kind of open their eyes a little to certain things that are going on and get them to start thinking about that and developing those skills on their own time. And of course, part of living in the real world is earning a living. We're a capitalist society. I think that having sensitivity to diversity and multiculturalism is very important, because you're not just going to work with people who are exactly like you for the rest of your life. In fact, to that end, we have a certificate program called Making Justice Visible. Students can log hours where they have attended certain events across campus or in our greater Boise community that have focused on a certain marginal identity category, whether it's race or class or gender or sexual orientation. They can log their hours, present them to me, the support coordinator, and they get a certificate that they can then put on their resume saying, I have dedicated my own personal time outside of class, outside of work, to developing these skills and understandings. And employers, they want that in this global digital world. Will going through this event, will it better prepare students to, if they see situations like you guys portray, handle that better in the real world, Andrew? I do hope that it will make them start the conversation with themselves about how would I handle that situation. Anybody who's ever been nervous about anything can probably attest to having conversations in their head, imagining the different ways that things can go. I think that I personally have had a lot of opportunities to change my behavior based on what I've seen in Tunnel, thinking about, wow, that thing I did 5 years ago must have had a terrible impact based on what I meant to say instead of how it actually came out. Better be more careful in the future. I think that teaching students to be more empathetic is very important, and I think that we achieve that.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Jasmine?
I definitely agree with Andrew. I think that skill of empathy is so important in our increasingly global world. Often we tend to think of things only in individualistic terms, and unfortunately, that's just not going to work. I think what's most important about Tunnel is that it encourages people to empathize, to see others' points of view, rather to just separate into us versus them categories. I think that's very valuable.
Now, Jasmine, there have been some criticisms of the Tunnel of Oppression, notably that the way it depicts race issues and kind of groups minorities into these broad categories. I mean, what do you say to that?
Let's see. In terms of race issues, some of the criticisms I've heard is that because racism doesn't exist anymore, that we shouldn't talk about it, that talking about it causes the problem to fester and get worse. And I'd have to disagree with that. I think racism nowadays works on covert rather than overt levels, and that we're actually much better off talking about it and working through it, recognizing it when it happens and changing it, than simply pretending it's not there.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Andrew?
As far as Jasmine's specific comments go, I think that ignoring a problem is hardly the way to solve it. And if you are of the mind that America is existing as a post-racial society, or conversely, that reverse racism is a thing that exists, you do not have a very good understanding of what racism actually is. And you should come to Tunnel of Oppression, talk to the actors, come to Multicultural Student Services, talk to the staff. We've had some other criticisms, I think, where departments and organizations on campus felt like they were being specifically targeted, where the students meant to criticize a general practice. And we've taken it under advisement to make sure that nothing that we cover could be depicted as a personal attack.
Now, you mentioned that, I mean, unfortunately, racism still does exist in our society. Is Tunnel of Oppression better able to combat that and, maybe one day live in a world where that doesn't exist, Andrew?
I don't think it'll be in our lifetime, but I think that each successive generation is becoming more conscious, and the more that we can do to spread a consciousness in this generation to pass to the next, the better. I think that Tunnel of Oppression is in a very good position. We've had some incredible people of color working with us, fantastic young Latino, Black, Pacific Islander, Asian people who are being encouraged to express the things that, as a predominantly white institution, students who do not share that ethnic background are very uncomfortable to hear. But it's absolutely necessary for them to grow as people and recognize their own ethnic heritage and their complicity in a system that values white people above all others, which is completely inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Jasmine?
I remember you mentioned that one criticism of Tunnel is that it lumps racial minorities into broad groups. I'd say that that has been a bit of a problem. And one of the problems that grows out of it is the idea that when something is presented in Tunnel as offensive or problematic, sometimes there are individuals within that broad group who don't experience that problem or don't feel that it is a problem. And that's great to hear. We need to hear all perspectives. But one thing to note is that just because some people aren't going through it doesn't mean that somebody else isn't going through it. And oftentimes voices are silenced when they say the thing that is most comfortable, like racism isn't happening or it's not really offensive, such like that.
Let's talk about the volunteers. Jasmine, do you get a really good turnout for people that volunteer their time and want to help out with this event?
Yes, we have people who've been coming here for years, who have brought their children, whose children have come back year after year. There's one young lady who's been with us for a long time now, and it's been amazing watching her grow.
What is the process that volunteers kind of have to go through if they want to get involved?
Let's see, we start out with training early in the semester to kind of give people the idea of what language we speak here, the critical engagement skills, and to kind of give them the idea of how our society works in terms of oppression and systematic abuse. think oftentimes we don't think of things that way in a systematic fashion. We think of it solely individualistic. So when you see something on TV, such as a beating of someone who happened to be homosexual, we think of it as, oh, that's just that one person, or it's just that one state, or it's just that one part of the country, when really it's not. It's bigger than that.
Now, Andrew, with the kind of stuff that volunteers have to do, I mean, how hard is it on them to do and portray the things that they are kind of doing for the purpose of the tunnel?
It is wearing. I think that after, at least in the indoor tunnels, after 3 days, I think this year it's just 2 days, but by the end of it, people are exhausted. By the time we get to debriefing, there are usually tears. Sometimes it is necessary to switch out actors in the middle of a day, in the middle of tunnel itself, the 2-day stretch, so that they are not too psychologically worn down to continue, because many of the actors are portraying things that they themselves have experienced. So it's a very personal and vulnerating environment. It can be difficult for the guides who are expected to push the audience along, make them feel physically uncomfortable with raised voices, rude speech, and they talk to us at length about how uncomfortable it made them feel to treat people that way, but that's what the debriefers are for. We can call them in at any time between performances to address one individual, to address a group, and of course we have mass debriefings with all of the participant and staff at the end of the complete performance.
Jasmine, how does this benefit the volunteers to be involved with tunnel of oppression?
I'd say it depends on their identity or identities. Oppression is definitely intersectional. Sometimes a person may suffer from one problem but not another. I'd say definitely that for some volunteers, it gives them a chance to voice the things that they haven't been able to voice before, to speak up for themselves, to find a voice, and to find support for that voice. There's often a feeling of camaraderie, even amongst people who don't go through the same oppressions, because they have this in-depth contact with someone who is going through that oppression, and it changes your perspective of the world, yourself, and it gives you a chance to bridge gaps and to find allies everywhere.
And then final question, guys. When is the tunnel of oppression going to be on campus?
This year it's going to be November 7th and 8th, Friday and Saturday.
Can you guys give us any inside scoop of what we're in for?
Sorry.
And then where can people go to find out more information about the tunnel of oppression event?
Our website is mss.boisestate.edu, and tunnel registration is open right now. All you have to do is go in and log on.
All right. All right, well, that's all the time that we have for UTP Presents. I'd like to thank my guests, Jasmine and Andrew. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. This is Brandon Walton signing off. Until next time.